Alaska, a place of towering mountains, endless forests, and thousands of square miles where a person can disappear without a trace. To most people, it represents freedom, adventure, and the last true frontier in America. But beneath that beauty lies a darker reality. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, young women began disappearing from the streets of Anchorage. Some were reported missing almost immediately. Others slipped away so quietly that days passed before anyone realized they were gone. Police investigated each case individually, but there were few witnesses, almost no physical evidence, and little to connect one disappearance to another. At first, no one realized they were hunting a serial killer, and no one could have imagined the horrifying way he chose his victims. His name was Robert Hansen. To his neighbors, he appeared to be the last person anyone would suspect. He owned a successful bakery, raised a family, paid his taxes, and kept largely to himself. Customers knew him as a hard-working businessman. Friends described him as quiet and reserved. Behind that ordinary life, however, was a secret so disturbing that it would eventually shock the entire country. Robert Hansen wasn't simply murdering women, he was hunting them. Long before investigators uncovered his crimes, Hansen had spent years cultivating the image of an ordinary citizen. Born in Estherville, Iowa, in 1939, he had a difficult childhood. He struggled with severe acne, battled a stutter, and often felt isolated from his classmates. By many accounts, he found it difficult to fit in and carried those insecurities well into adulthood. As he grew older, one activity gave him confidence: hunting. In the woods, Hansen excelled. He became an exceptional marksman, developing patience, discipline, and an intimate understanding of how to track prey across difficult terrain. Eventually, he moved to Alaska, where the vast wilderness offered endless opportunities for the sport he loved. There, he built what looked like the perfect life. He married, started a family, opened a bakery that became well known in Anchorage. To everyone around him, Robert Hansen appeared to have achieved the American dream. But appearances can be dangerously deceptive. As the years passed, women continued disappearing throughout Anchorage. Many of the victims were young. Several were involved in sex work or lived difficult lives, making their disappearances less likely to receive widespread attention. For investigators, every case seemed frustratingly incomplete. There were few witnesses, few clues, and no obvious suspect. Meanwhile, Hansen continued living his double life unnoticed. He would search Anchorage for vulnerable women, offering them money or a ride. Some accepted because they needed help. Others believed they were simply meeting another customer. Instead, they were walking into a nightmare. According to evidence later uncovered by investigators, Hansen would abduct his victims and transport them away from the city. But his crimes did not end there. Rather than killing them immediately, he flew some of them deep into the Alaskan wilderness using his small airplane. Miles from civilization, miles from help. He left them completely alone. Then he hunted them through the forest. It was a level of calculated cruelty that stunned even experienced investigators. The wilderness itself became part of the crime. Dense forests limited visibility. Cold temperatures drained strength. The uneven terrain slowed anyone trying to escape. For the victims, survival depended on outrunning a man who knew the landscape better than almost anyone else. For years, the isolation of Alaska worked in Hansen's favor. Missing persons cases were difficult enough to investigate inside the city. Tracking someone across thousands of square miles of wilderness was nearly impossible. As more women disappeared, rumors spread throughout Anchorage. Some believed a killer was targeting vulnerable women. Others dismissed the disappearances as unrelated. Without solid evidence, investigators struggled to prove otherwise. Then everything changed. One woman survived. In June of 1983, a woman named Cindy Paulson escaped after being abducted by Hansen. According to investigators, she managed to flee while still handcuffed and reached a nearby road, where a passing driver stopped to help. Terrified, she told police an unbelievable story. She described being kidnapped, assaulted, and threatened by a man who planned to fly her into the wilderness. At first glance, her account sounded almost impossible. But detectives listened carefully. She identified Robert Hansen as her attacker. When officers questioned him, Hansen denied everything. On the surface, his explanation seemed convincing. He had no criminal reputation for murder. He was a respected businessman, a family man, someone few people imagined capable of such violence. Yet one investigator refused to let the case go. Detective Glenn Fluth believed there was more to Hansen than anyone realized. Working alongside members of the Alaska State Troopers, investigators began comparing Hansen to the growing number of unsolved disappearances. The similarities became harder to ignore. Victims fit similar profiles. The timelines overlapped, and Hansen possessed both the knowledge and the means to commit the crimes. Still, investigators needed proof. Eventually, they obtained a search warrant for Hansen's home. What they discovered transformed the investigation. Inside, officers recovered firearms matching ballistic evidence connected to victims. They found jewelry belonging to missing women. Most chilling of all, they discovered an aviation map. At first glance, it appeared ordinary, but scattered across the map were markings identifying remote locations throughout the Alaskan wilderness. Investigators flew to several of those locations. What they found confirmed their worst fears: human remains. The map was no longer just a map. It had become a guide to burial sites. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Hansen eventually confessed to multiple murders. He admitted that he had abducted women, flown them into isolated wilderness areas, and killed them. His confession helped investigators solve cases that had remained mysteries for years. In 1984, Robert Hansen pleaded guilty to multiple counts of murder, kidnapping, and related crimes. In exchange for his cooperation in locating victims and explaining several of the crimes, prosecutors agreed not to seek additional murder trials for every known victim. He was sentenced to hundreds of years in prison, ensuring he would never walk free again. For the families of the victims, however, the sentence could never erase what had happened. Many had spent years wondering where their loved ones had gone. Some had never stopped searching. Others had feared they would never know the truth. Although Hansen's confession answered many questions, it could not undo the pain left behind. His crimes also forced investigators to confront uncomfortable realities. Several victims had initially received less attention because of their circumstances in life. The case became a reminder that every missing person deserves to be taken seriously, regardless of background or profession. Over time, Robert Hansen became known as one of America's most notorious serial killers. Yet, compared with names like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, his story remains surprisingly unfamiliar to many people. Perhaps that's because his crimes occurred far from major cities, or perhaps it's because what he did is almost too disturbing to comprehend. The idea that someone could use the wilderness itself as a weapon, that someone could transform one of the most beautiful places on Earth into a hunting ground, feels more like fiction than reality, but it wasn't fiction. It happened. And for years, it happened without anyone realizing the full extent of what was taking place. Today, the forests of Alaska remain as beautiful as ever. Visitors still travel there in search of breathtaking landscapes and unforgettable adventures. Most will never think about the darkness that once hid beneath those towering trees. But the story of Robert Hansen serves as a reminder that evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind a friendly smile. Sometimes it wears the face of an ordinary neighbor. And sometimes the most dangerous predator in the wilderness isn't an animal at all,